She didn't knock. The door swung open and she walked in, heels hitting the floor like she was counting the tiles. Han Tae-won looked up from his glass. She didn't look at him. She looked at the room first, the empty bottles lined against the wall, the curtains drawn at 2 in the afternoon, the desk buried under nothing because he hadn't worked in 3 days. Then she looked at him and started walking around him, slow, once, twice. He turned his chair to follow her, and she stopped behind him, so he had to choose, turn again or sit still. He sat still. She leaned down until her mouth was level with his ear. "You want to break up? Say it. Don't hide behind a desk and make me guess." 3 days later, she was sitting across from his mother in a restaurant that cost more per plate than most people's rent. The check slid across the table. Stephanie watched it travel. Didn't stop it. Didn't touch it. Let it sit there between them like the woman across from her thought paper could end things. Han Tae-won's mother folded her hands and waited with the patience of someone who had done this before. 3 times before, to be exact. Stephanie picked up her tea, took a sip, set it down. Then she reached out, picked up the check, unfolded it, read the number, folded it again, and dropped it into her bag. She stood up, buttoned her jacket, and smiled. "I like her already," she would tell Tae-won later. "She tips well." But we are getting ahead of ourselves. If you are new here, welcome. We tell African-Korean love stories full of power, chaos, and women who do not flinch. Subscribe, turn on your notifications, and don't go anywhere. Because this story is about to show you exactly what kind of woman Stephanie Terry is, exactly what kind of man Han Tae-won is, and exactly what happens when 2 people from 2 dangerous worlds find each other and decide to call it love. Han Tae-won's convoy was 4 cars, always 4, black, moving through Seoul in the kind of formation that didn't request traffic to part, it simply parted. His driver knew every route. Mr. O, his head of security, rode front left and had done so for 6 years without a single sick day. 2 more men flanked the rear. When the convoy moved, people noticed. When it stopped, people paid attention. This was not something Tae-won had arranged or announced. It was simply something that had become true about him, the way certain things become true about powerful men. Quietly, completely, without ceremony. He was 34. He ran an empire that had his name on it in places most people never looked, and his mother's fingerprints on it in places he had not yet finished counting. He had a penthouse overlooking the Han River, a study with a bar better stocked than most restaurants, and a reputation in certain circles that rearranged rooms when he walked into them. His board feared him. His competitors respected him. His staff would walk through fire for him and had on 2 occasions come reasonably close. He had built all of this brick by brick with his own hands starting from the age of 24, and he had done it with the focused, unhurried precision of a man who understood that power was not loud. Power was patient. Power showed up on time and left when it was ready and never explained itself to anyone. He also had one promise he had made to himself 4 years ago in a restaurant where 2 desserts went cold while he sat alone and understood something permanent about his life. Never again. It had started with a dinner. He had found a woman he wanted to build something with, reserved a table 3 weeks in advance, worn his own jacket because his housekeeper was off that evening, and sat across from his mother over 4 courses that nobody finished. His mother had not raised her voice, had not moved from her chair, had not said a single word that could be repeated in a church or a courtroom. She had simply looked at the woman across the table. That was all, just looked, with the patient, total, unhurried certainty of a woman who had never once needed to raise her voice to make a point. 40 minutes in, the woman excused herself for the bathroom, walked out of the restaurant, flagged a cab in the rain, called him the next morning to end everything without a single explanation. He had driven home in silence, walked into his study, sat down, made himself one promise. Never again. Not because he was afraid, not because he was broken, because he was intelligent. Love in his world came with a price, and he had looked at the invoice and put it down permanently. 4 years, not one slip, not one woman who made him reconsider. His empire grew, his board doubled, his name reached cities he had never visited. Life was organized and controlled, and exactly as he had arranged it. Then Collins Paul called on a Wednesday morning. Collins was one of 3 people on Earth who could call Tae-won's personal line without receiving a very specific silence on the other end that communicated everything without saying anything. They had known each other since university. Collins had watched Taewon build his empire from the first brick, and had watched him sit alone at that restaurant table 4 years ago, and had said nothing because Taewon was not a man who accepted comfort he hadn't requested, and he never requested it. "I have someone for your legal team." Taewon was reviewing contracts at his desk. "Send the profile." She runs her own firm, Terry & Associates, East Side. "Very good, send the profile, Collins." Taewon. "What?" "Send her a meeting request. Trust me on this one." He sent the request. He needed legal restructuring. This was a professional decision for professional reasons and nothing else. He went back to his contracts and did not think about it again. Stephanie Terry arrived on a Thursday at 9:40 in the morning, and the first indication that something was different was his assistant. She was walking toward his office with a file in her hand, and she stopped, mid-stride, in the middle of the open floor. Just stopped and stared. Taewon looked up from his desk through the glass wall and followed her eyes. A woman was crossing his office floor like she had already decided it belonged to her and was simply completing the paperwork. Burgundy, a dramatic one-shoulder cape top that moved like it had its own opinion, wide leg trousers that hit the floor with every step, a YSL clutch tucked under her arm, gold earrings, burgundy patent stiletto heels. The kind of outfit that didn't perform for a room and received the room's full attention anyway. A file under one arm, eyes straight ahead with the expression of someone who had already assessed every person in the space, filed her conclusions, and moved on to more interesting business. Mr. O, standing at his post near the elevator, Mr. O, who had taken a blade to the forearm at 2 in the morning once and finished his 12-hour shift without mentioning it to a single person, shifted his weight, left foot to right, just once, just slightly. Like his body had received information his brain was still processing. Taewon's assistant was standing frozen in the middle of the floor with her file. "Out," Taewon said through the intercom. She left without saying a word. Stephanie knocked once and opened the door before anyone responded. She walked to the chair across from his desk, sat down with the ease of someone sitting in their own office, opened her file, and looked up. "Mr. Han, I have reviewed your current legal structure. There are 3 exposure points that will cost you money in year 2, and 1 that will cost you something that is not money. Which do you want first?" Taewon looked at her. "The money." She started with the money. He did not hear a single word she said for the first 3 minutes because something was happening in his chest that he had not given permission for, and he was busy revoking it. He looked at her hands moving over the documents. Her voice was even and precise, and moved through legal language the way water moves through familiar territory, without effort, without hesitation, knowing every turn before it arrived. She paused at one point and looked up and caught him not reading the document she had slid across to him. "Mr. Han, I'm reading it. You're looking at the top left corner. The relevant section is page 3. He turned to page 3. Something moved at the corner of her mouth that she controlled before it became anything. He saw it. He looked at page 3 and felt something happen in his chest that he had not given permission for and spent the next 4 minutes quietly revoking. He was a disciplined man. He had a promise. He turned to page 3 and read it and said nothing about any of it. And Han Taewon, a man who had not felt anything he hadn't scheduled in 4 years, made a private, immediate, non-negotiable decision that he was going to need Collins Paul to explain himself. He called Collins from the back of his car that evening. "You said she was good." "She is good. You didn't finish your sentence this morning." "Which sentence?" "Very good, that sentence." Collins laughed the laugh of a man who had been waiting for this call. "How was the meeting?" "Professional." "Of course it was." "Collins, Taewon. I need her full profile, professional, academic, everything." The laugh that came through the phone was loud enough that his driver adjusted the rearview mirror. "The man who vowed never again is calling me at 7 p.m. requesting a woman's complete profile for professional reasons. Send it tonight." "Already sent it an hour ago. She's single, by the way. Included it at the bottom. Thought it might be professionally relevant." He hung up before Taewon could find a response. In the front seat, Mr. O and the driver exchanged a look in the rearview mirror. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them was going to say anything, but the look happened, and both of them knew exactly what it meant, and neither of them slept particularly well that night because they understood that whatever was coming was going to change the temperature of everything. 6 weeks passed. Stephanie restructured his legal exposure, closed gaps that 3 previous lawyers had missed entirely, and moved through his organization with the quiet authority of someone who understood power structures, not just legally, but fundamentally, from the inside. The way she entered a negotiation room and said nothing for the first 4 minutes, and then said one thing that changed the direction of everything. The way his board members, men who had been in rooms with dangerous people for decades and knew exactly what danger felt like, sat up slightly straighter when she put a document on the table. The way she looked at contracts, the way certain people look at opponents, with total focus and no emotion, and the absolute certainty that she was going to find what she was looking for. Taewon watched all of this from various distances, said nothing about any of it to anyone. He was also calling Collins at hours that had nothing to do with business. She caught a clause in the Lim contract today that would have cost us significantly in arbitration. Taewon, it's 9:30 at night. It was a significant clause. You have email. She handled it in 40 minutes. Good night. She didn't look rattled once, not once. Collins hung up, called back 30 seconds later. 5 calls this week, I counted. 5 separate calls in which you have mentioned this woman without me bringing her up first. A pause. She's still single. I didn't ask. I know, good night. He hung up again. Taewon put his phone down, picked it up, put it down, looked at the ceiling of his study, picked it up again and read the profile Collins had sent 6 weeks ago that he had not stopped reading with some regularity since the day it arrived. He put his phone down, went to bed, did not sleep particularly well. He was a disciplined man. He had a promise. He was in serious trouble. The charity gala was the 3rd week of October. Black tie. Taewon attended because his position required it and not for any other reason, and he had said this to himself 3 times while getting dressed, which was 2 more times than a man who truly didn't care would need to say it. His convoy arrived at 8. He walked in with Mr. O on his left and 2 men behind, and the room reorganized itself the way it always did. Conversations shifting direction, people finding reasons to drift toward where he was going. He moved through all of it with the ease of a man who had stopped registering this effect years ago because it had simply always been true. Stephanie arrived at 8:15, a black, long-sleeved fitted shirt tucked into a dramatic floral corset, cinched at the waist over wide-leg black trousers, gold earrings, black platform heels, a black Dior saddlebag on her shoulder, the kind of outfit designed by someone who understood the difference between dressing for a room and dressing for yourself. She came in alone, picked up a drink from the first tray she passed, and began moving through the space with the same quality she brought to everything. Unhurried, complete, missing nothing. She stopped twice to speak to people, and both times the people she stopped to speak to stood up slightly straighter without realizing they had done it. They ended up near the bar by 9. She was making quiet observations about the other guests, precise, devastating, completely straight-faced, and Taewon had looked away twice to avoid laughing in public, which was twice more than he had done at any event in 4 years. She said something about a man in a yellow tie that he would still be thinking about at 11 o'clock that night. He was more relaxed than he had been at one of these events in years, and he knew exactly why, and he was not going to do anything about it. He had a promise. He was a disciplined man. Then a man appeared. Tall, well put together. The particular smile of someone who knew it had always worked and had no reason to believe tonight would be different. He walked directly to Stephanie, said her name with the easy familiarity of someone who knew her well, and she turned and said his name back with the warmth of someone genuinely happy to see him. They shook hands, started talking. The man said something and Stephanie laughed. Real laughter, completely unguarded, head back, her hand landing briefly on the man's arm, and Taewon picked up his drink and set it back down without tasting it. He watched the man lean toward her. She didn't lean back. The man said something else. She laughed again, her whole face open in a way Taewon had not seen across a desk or in a negotiation room, and something happened inside his chest that he had not authorized and was not equipped to manage standing at a bar in a room full of people. Han Taewon did not wait for an invitation. He crossed the room with the particular energy of a man who has made a decision and is already 3 steps into implementing it. Appeared at Stephanie's side, extended his hand to the man and said Han Taewon in the voice his staff recognized as the one that closed things without raising itself. The man shook his hand and smiled. They looked at each other for a moment. Very civil, very direct, very clear. Then the man said he should find his wife and excused himself and was gone. Stephanie watched him leave, turned to Taewon. That was my cousin. Taewon said nothing. His wife has been standing by the entrance in a green dress watching you panic for the last 6 minutes. He said nothing. 3 children, married 6 years. She picked up her drink. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Mr. Han. She moved back into the crowd, and he stood at the bar alone with his untouched drink and the absolute clear knowledge that his promise was in serious danger, and he did not care even slightly, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. He called her into his office on Monday morning. His assistant had been told no interruptions. The blinds on the glass wall were down for the first time on a Monday afternoon in the history of his tenure, and every single person on that floor knew something was happening, and not one of them was going to say what they thought it was out loud. Mr. O stood at his post near the elevator with his hands behind his back and his face completely neutral, which was the face he used when he already knew something and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. Stephanie walked in with her notepad open because she assumed professional. He looked at the notepad. Put that away. She put it away. He stood up from behind his desk, walked around it, and stood directly in front of her. Not behind the desk, not with the desk between them. Just standing there in the open space of his own office. The desk had always been between them. He had decided today that the desk was the problem. He looked at her for a moment. She looked back and waited with the patience of someone who had learned that Han Taiwan said things exactly once, and you needed to be completely present for it. I love you, he said, and I would like to take a step with you, if that is something you want. The office was very quiet. Stephanie held his eyes, long enough that he became aware of his own heartbeat in a way that was inconvenient for a man of his specific reputation. Then she said, yes. He stared at her. Just like that? Just like that. You're not going to... He stopped, started again. I thought there would be... Taewon. Questions or conditions or some kind of... Do you want there to be conditions? No. Then we agreed. She stood and picked up her notepad. He watched her walk toward the door with the expression of a man who had prepared extensively for a negotiation that lasted 10 seconds. She stopped at the door, turned around, looked at him. He looked back at her. Just like that? Just like that. He stared at her for a moment. No forms to fill? No manual I should study first? She held his eyes for 5 full seconds with the straightest face he had ever seen on a human being. Then she opened the door and walked out, and he could hear her laughing all the way down the corridor past his assistant, past Mr. O, past the elevator, and all the way to wherever she was going. He stood alone in his office with his hands in his pockets, and something on his face that Mr. O passing the open doorway saw and stopped and looked at, and then walked away very quickly to find the driver, because the driver needed to know about this immediately. Han Taewon was smiling. They had been together for 2 months. 2 months of her walking into his office in the morning and him looking up from his desk, and the day reorganizing itself slightly without either of them deciding it should. 2 months of dinners where he talked and she listened and she talked and he forgot to check his phone. 2 months of her telling stories that made him laugh in the way he had not laughed in a very long time, from somewhere real, without managing it first. 2 months of her looking at him across tables and rooms and documents with the particular quality of attention that made him feel like a man who had been looked at correctly for the first time. Collins noticed immediately. He showed up at Taewon's office unannounced one afternoon, dropped into the guest chair, looked at Taewon behind his desk and said, "You look different." "I look exactly the same." "You're sitting differently. You're sitting like a man who is happy and is trying not to show it and is doing a genuinely terrible job." Collins leaned forward. "How is she?" "She restructured our entire arbitration exposure last week, found a clause in the part contract that 3 previous lawyers missed, saved us a significant amount in potential..." Taewon. "What? I have known you for 15 years. I know. How is she?" Taewon looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "She told a story at dinner on Friday. 40 minutes. I didn't check my phone once." He said it the way he said facts, simply, without decoration. Collins sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling and was quiet for a moment because sometimes there was nothing to say, and this was one of those times, and Collins was smart enough to know the difference. Then he stood up. "I'm glad," he said. Taewon nodded. Collins walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "She's good for you. The real you, not the convoy you." Taewon said nothing. Collins left. The convoy you. Taewon sat with those 3 words for a long time after Collins left, and then he put them away and went back to his reports and did not think about them for the rest of the afternoon, which meant he thought about them constantly. His mother arrived on a Tuesday without calling ahead because calling ahead was a courtesy, and Han Boksun did not deal in courtesies. She walked past his assistant without slowing, opened his office door, walked in wearing a fur coat the weather absolutely did not require, and sat down in his chair. His chair, behind his desk, with her handbag placed on his desk like a flag on freshly acquired territory. Taewon walked in behind her, looked at his chair, looked at her in it, hung his jacket on the hook behind the door, and sat down in the guest chair across from his own desk, because the alternative was a conversation about the chair, and he did not have time for that today. His mother looked at him the way she looked at everything, like she had already reached her conclusions and was simply waiting for reality to catch up. Minjung is back. No. She has been abroad. She is ready now, and the timing is no Iyama. Taewon. She placed her hands flat on his desk, and leaned forward slightly. She is carrying a child. The alliance between our families has been discussed for 2 years. This is not a small thing. This is about the Han name and what it requires and what you owe to. Is it my child? She stopped. Is the child mine, Iyama? She recalibrated. The alliance is not my child, is not my alliance, is not my concern. He stood up, smoothed his jacket. His voice had not changed temperature once. I'll have lunch sent up. Eat before you drive back. He walked out of his own office, past his assistant who had heard every word and was looking at her desk with tremendous focus, and did not look back once. In the corridor, he kept walking until he reached the elevator. Mr. O fell into step. Everything we have on the family holding documents, Taewon said without looking at him. Original filings, all amendments, everything attached to the founding structure, on my desk by tonight. Mr. O said tonight. Taewon said tonight. He got in the elevator, the doors closed. He stood alone in the small moving box and looked at his own reflection in the brushed steel and thought about a cage built around him so slowly and so lovingly that he had never noticed it until he tried to move. That night he read the documents. He read them the way he read everything that mattered, slowly, completely, nothing skipped. An hour in, he stopped on a page, read it again, read it a third time, sat back in his chair, looked at the ceiling, poured a drink. The founding papers of the Han Empire, original registrations, primary ownership filings, the documents that determined who controlled what, if everything was ever put to a vote or a court or a crisis. Filed 20 years ago under arrangements his mother had overseen when he was 26 and knew to everything, and had signed where she pointed because she was his mother, and he had trusted her completely, and it had never once occurred to him that the woman who raised him was also quietly, methodically, patiently building a structure around everything he owned that gave her more leverage than he had ever thought to question. He poured another drink, sat with it, sat with the documents, sat with the very cold understanding of what his mother was planning and why Minjung's timing was not an accident, and why the alliance had been discussed for 2 years, and why none of it had been discussed with him. He did not go to the office the next morning. He did not go the morning after that either. He sat in his study with the curtains drawn and the bottles getting company and the phone going unanswered and the particular stillness of a man who is not resting but is also not yet ready to move. On the second day his father came. Not through the front. His father never came through the front when his mother didn't know he was going somewhere. He came through the garden entrance, the one that had been there since before Taewon was born, and that his mother had never once thought to monitor because it had never once occurred to her that her husband would use it for anything other than looking at the garden. He knocked on the study door. Taewon looked up from his desk. His father opened the door and stood in the frame and looked at the room, the curtains, the bottles, his son behind the desk, and said nothing about any of it. He walked in, sat down in the chair across from the desk, looked at Taewon. They were quiet for a moment. Then his father said, "She came to see you. Tuesday. Minjung's family has been meeting with her for 3 months." He looked at his hands on his lap. "She didn't tell you." "I know." "The documents." His father looked up. His eyes were clear and direct and held something in them that Taewon recognized as a man who had made a decision he should have made a long time ago. "You found them." Taewon said nothing. His father took that as the answer it was. He nodded slowly. I signed them too. I was there. I was 28 and I signed where she pointed because I trusted her and because I was 28 and did not yet understand the difference between a wife and a warden. He looked at the window, the curtains. I have regretted it for the last 30 years. A long pause. The girl, the one Colin sent. He looked back at his son. What is she? A lawyer. Something moved across his father's face, something that looked like the particular relief of a man who has been waiting for a specific answer for a very long time and has finally received it. Good, he said. Just that one word, carrying 30 years inside it. He stood up, straightened his jacket, looked at his son sitting behind his desk in the dark with the curtains closed. She came, he said, and you sent her away. Taewon said nothing. Don't do that again. His father said it quietly, without drama, the way a man says something he has been waiting a long time to say and is making sure it lands cleanly. Whatever you are afraid of losing, you will not protect it by sitting in the dark. You will only lose it faster. He looked at his son for one more moment. Then he walked to the door, stopped, did not turn around. Open the curtains, Taewon. The city is still there. He walked out through the garden entrance and was gone. Taewon sat in his study for a long time after his father left. He looked at the curtains, he looked at the bottles, he looked at the documents on his desk. He looked at his phone with 17 missed calls from his staff and 3 from Collins and none from Stephanie, because Stephanie was not the kind of woman who called 17 times. She came instead. The first day she came, his security told her he was unavailable. She stood at the gate, looked at the house behind the guard, looked at the guard, turned around and left without a word. The guard watched her go and felt, without being able to explain it professionally, that he had made an error he was going to answer for. The second day she came back, she was told he was unwell and seeing no one. She stood at the gate longer this time, looked at the house, looked at the guard who was now looking back with the expression of a man whose confidence in his instructions was declining rapidly. She turned around and left. The third day she came back and did not stop at the gate. She walked up, took out her key card, pressed her thumb to the panel without breaking her stride. The gate beeped, opened. The guard stepped forward, looked at her face, stepped back. She walked up the path without acknowledging him, through the front door, through the entrance hall, through the corridor, past the housekeeper who appeared in a doorway and then found an urgent reason to be in a completely different room, past 6 staff members who did the same thing. She found his study, pushed the door open and walked in. Curtains drawn at 2 in the afternoon, empty bottles arranged against the wall in a line that suggested he had been keeping count. The desk cleared of everything except him and a glass, and 3 days of something he had not dealt with sitting on him like weather. She walked in, looked at the room, looked at him, and started walking around him, once, twice, slow and deliberate. He turned his chair to follow her, and she stopped behind him, so he had to choose. Turn again like a man losing something or sit still and let her say what she came to say. He sat still. She leaned down until her mouth was at his ear. You want to break up? Say it. Don't hide behind a desk and make me guess. I'm not hiding. The curtains at 2 in the afternoon are doing it for you. He turned to face her. She had come around to the front of the desk now, standing close enough that he couldn't look away without making a choice about it. Talk to me, she said, not soft, not demanding, just direct, the way she said everything that mattered. He talked. He told her about his mother's visit, about Min Jung, about the alliance that had been arranged without him for 2 years, about the way his mother moved through his life, quiet and total and rearranging things before he noticed they had been touched. He told her about the restaurant 4 years ago, and the woman who had run and the promise he had made to himself, standing alone at that table with 2 cold desserts and understanding for the first time exactly what kind of man his mother had decided he was going to be. He told her he had kept that promise every single day until a Thursday morning in October, when a woman in a burgundy suit walked through his office door and sat down across from his desk like she had already decided the room belonged to her and told him to turn to page 3, and everything he had so carefully organized started becoming something else entirely without his permission. He talked for a long time. She listened without filling a single silence. When he stopped, the room was completely quiet. I already knew, she said. He looked at her. How? Taewon. She said it the way you say a name when you need someone to stop performing and actually listen. I am a lawyer. You are my boyfriend. Your mother started making calls the week after the gala. I have people. I do research. It is literally what I do for a living. A pause. What I did not have was you telling me things instead of sitting in the dark for 3 days having a private conversation with a bottle. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you love me?" "You know I do." "I need to hear it." She held his eyes, really held them. "I love you. I have loved you since you crossed a room at a gala like you were the only person in it and then tried to convince both of us it was a professional decision." Something moved across his face, something unguarded and real and completely unmanaged. She held his eyes. "Do you love me?" "Yes." "Say it." He looked at her for a long moment. "I love you. I have loved you since Thursday morning when you walked into my office and told me to turn to page 3, and I have not been the same man since." She looked at him for a long moment. "Do you want to do life with me?" "Yes." "Then open the curtains, we have work to do." He stood up, walked to the window, pulled the curtains open. Soul came back through the glass, light and noise and the city moving the way it always moved, fast and bright and without apology. He stood there looking at it for a moment, then he turned back to her. She was already looking at him, already present, already thinking. "My mother has been presenting altered documents to the board," he said. "The original founding documents of the Han Group have my name on them as primary holder. What she has been showing everyone is not the original." He paused. "I need to find the original before she moves on the Minjung alliance. Once she formalizes that alliance with the altered documents, as the anchor it takes years to unwind." He looked at her. "I need your eyes on everything that can be challenged legally, every thread that can be pulled." Stephanie picked up her phone. "Where is the original?" "In a safe. I traced enough of the registration trail to know which office. The safe has a code." "Who has the code?" "My father." He said it steadily. "My father has the code. My mother trusts him completely. Has never once considered him a variable in any of this, which means she told him things she told no one else." He paused. "You have to understand something about my father. He has not made a single decision in that house without her approval in 30 years. She picks his suits. She approves his schedule. She decides which events he attends and which opinions he is allowed to have at the dinner table. To her, he is not a threat. He is the furniture she trusts." He looked at Stephanie, which is exactly why she gave him the code. It never once occurred to her that the furniture would move. He paused. "I also believe he will give it to me willingly, but I need her looking somewhere else entirely when we move. If she is watching me, she will see it coming." Stephanie looked at him, the look she gave problems she had decided to solve. "I have someone who owes me a favor, for the retrieval." She said it simply, like a woman confirming she had a pen when someone needed one. "I'll call him." She held his eyes. "Don't move on anything until I tell you, and don't talk to your father yet. Let me look at the legal architecture first. 2 days. 1.5. 2 days, Taewon." He looked at her for a moment. 2 days. She picked up her bag, walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "And open a window in here. It smells like a decision you already regret." She walked out. He stood in his study with the curtains open and Soul coming through the glass and the faint smell of 3 days of bad decisions still in the air. Then he picked up his phone and called Mr. O. "I'm coming in tomorrow morning." "Yes, sir." "Have the convoy ready at 7. "Yes, sir." He hung up, looked at the bottles along the wall, picked them up one by one and put them away. Opened the window. The city came in. On Friday evening, he came to her apartment for dinner, the first time since the curtains, the first time since the city came back through the window, and they had eaten and talked, and it had been the particular ease of two people who had said something important to each other and were now on the other side of it. He told her over the last of the wine, "I want to introduce you to my family, this Saturday." She looked at him across the table. "This Saturday?" "Yes." She was quiet for exactly 1 second. "Okay. My mother will be there." "I know. It might be—" She put her wine glass down. "For who?" He opened his mouth, looked at her, closed it. She picked up her glass again. "Saturday." And that was all. He drove home that night thinking about the word uncomfortable and how completely inadequate it was for what he had just arranged. Saturday arrived. The Han family home was running on his mother's frequency, which meant everything was precise and timed and placed exactly where she wanted it, and anyone who placed anything differently was going to hear about it. She had been in the kitchen since morning directing the catering staff with the intensity of a woman who believed professionals needed oversight, and that oversight meant her physical presence at all times within arm's reach of everything being prepared. The staff moved around her with the careful, controlled energy of people who were very good at their jobs, being supervised by someone who did not fully believe in the concept of other people being good at things. She was explaining for the third time, in very clear terms, the correct angle for the garnish on the appetizer tray when something shifted in the room. Not a sound, not a movement she could identify, just a shift. The particular change in atmosphere that happens when a presence enters a space and the space registers it before the people in it do. She turned around. Stephanie Terry was standing at her kitchen counter examining a knife, not threatening anyone, not saying a single word, simply holding it up toward the light, turning it slowly between her fingers, tilting it one way and then the other, the way a person examines a thing when they are genuinely assessing its quality and have no interest in performing for an audience. She had clearly been standing there for at least a full minute. Nobody had heard her come in. Nobody had seen her arrive. The kitchen had simply been going about its business, and then she was there, standing at the counter with a knife in her hand like she had grown out of the floor. Stephanie looked up from the knife still in her hand, met Mrs. Hand's eyes, smiled with the warm, open expression of someone who had just found something genuinely impressive. "Your kitchen is beautiful. Are these German? The balance is extraordinary." She turned it slowly in the light one more time. Mrs. Hand's hand went to her chest. What happened next happened fast and loud, and involved several things at once. Mrs. Hand's legs made a decision that her brain had not yet approved, and she was suddenly in a chair. Someone behind her knocked over something that made a significant noise. A garnish that had been held in the air for the explanation went in a direction nobody had intended. Two members of the catering staff achieved a state of complete physical stillness that suggested they had decided the safest course of action was to temporarily cease to exist as functional human beings. Taewon's father appeared in the kitchen doorway and looked at the scene unfolding in front of him with wide eyes and an expression that contained no fewer than 4 distinct emotions, none of which he was going to let onto his face. Stephanie was still standing at the counter with the knife in her hand. She turned it over and looked at the handle. "The grip is excellent, too," she said helpfully. Taewon came running from the sitting room where he had been with his father making introductions. He burst through the kitchen door, took in the entire situation in approximately 1.5 seconds. His mother in a chair, the catering staff in various states of professional paralysis, his father in the doorway doing something complicated with his face, Stephanie at the counter with the knife, and stood there. "Iyama." His mother raised a trembling finger and pointed it directly at Stephanie. "An assassin." She said it with the absolute conviction of a woman who had assessed a situation and reached the only logical conclusion available. "You brought an assassin into my house for a family lunch." "I was looking at the knife," Stephanie said. "Why are you looking at my knives?" "It's a beautiful knife. I was checking the balance. The weight distribution on German knives is very specific, and this one has the balance." Mrs. Hand looked at her son with the eyes of a woman who needed him to understand the gravity of this moment immediately and completely. "She is standing in my kitchen discussing the balance of my kitchen knives like a person who uses knives in a professional capacity." "I cook," Stephanie offered. "You cook," Taewon's father in the doorway made a sound. It was a small sound. He converted it immediately into a cough. Nobody looked at him. "Iyama, she is a lawyer," Taewon said. His mother looked at him, looked at Stephanie, looked at the knife, looked back at her son. "A lawyer," she said, in the tone of someone filing this information under categories that did not reassure her. "The knife is really very good," Stephanie said. She set it back down on the counter gently. "You have excellent taste." Mrs. Hand's hand went back to her chest. They called an ambulance. The doctor at the hospital said panic response. Completely fine. Physically absolutely fine. No cardiac event. Just panic. She would be completely fine. She was already completely fine. She was sitting up in the hospital bed and talking by the time they settled her in, and the talking was pointed and specific and entirely about the woman currently sitting in the hospital corridor, outside eating a biscuit she had produced from somewhere in her bag. Taewon sat beside his mother's bed. She grabbed his wrist. "An assassin, Taewon. She is a lawyer, Iyama." "Same thing." Her grip tightened on his wrist. I want her gone, today. That woman is not welcome in this family, and I want that understood clearly. Minjung is carrying a child. Her family has been patient. The alliance is still on the table, and it will not stay on the table forever. You have a responsibility to this name and to what we have built, and I have not spent 30 years of my life managing this family so that you can throw everything away because a woman walked into your office and smiled at you. Do you understand me? That woman walked into my kitchen and picked up my knife and stood there examining it like she was making a decision about something, and I am telling you right now as your mother who has given her entire life to this family and to your future, call Minjung's family today. Fix this, today. You should rest. I am resting and I am telling you. She sat up straighter against the pillow, which was impressive for a woman who had arrived by ambulance 40 minutes ago. Minjung's family is waiting. Her family is still open. Call them today, if you keep making decisions with your Iyama. He said it once, quietly, the way he said things when the conversation was done. When you have recovered, we will talk about my wife. Rest now. She sat straight up. He stood, straightened his jacket, looked at her for a moment. This woman who had moved through his life like weather, quiet and total, rearranging everything before he noticed, and walked out before she could find the next word. The door clicked shut behind him. From inside the room, he could hear her starting again. He kept walking. In the corridor, Stephanie was sitting in a waiting chair with a biscuit. She looked up when he came out and held up the packet. He sat down beside her and took one. They sat in the hospital corridor in silence for a moment. She called you an assassin, he said. I heard. Because of the knife. It was a genuinely excellent knife. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the completely unbothered expression of a woman who had given someone's mother a hospital-grade panic response over kitchen cutlery and had processed this information and moved on. He looked at the biscuit in his hand. He looked at the corridor. Something started in his chest that moved upward. He pressed his lips together. It didn't work. He put the biscuit in his mouth so that his face had something to do, and chewed very deliberately and stared at the wall opposite, and Stephanie watched him do all of this and said nothing and ate her biscuit, and they sat there in the hospital corridor not laughing for a full minute and 45 seconds. She is going to come for you when she recovers, he said, when he had sufficiently controlled his face. I know. Directly, she is not going to approach this sideways. Good. Stephanie finished her biscuit. I prefer direct. She stood up, picked up her bag. Come on, take me home. We have work to do in the morning. He stood. They walked out of the hospital together, and Sol was doing what Sol always did outside, moving, bright, fast, without apology. And he reached across and took her hand, and she let him, and that was all. His mother recovered in 4 days. On the 5th day, she made a call to a restaurant she used for serious things and arranged a lunch and called Stephanie directly because Han Boxen did not send messages through intermediaries when she could deliver them herself. Stephanie wore a deep brown structured blazer dress, the one she wore when she had already assessed a situation completely and was simply going to go and confirm what she already knew. They sat across from each other at a table that cost more per hour than most people's daily wage. Tea was ordered. The small talk lasted exactly as long as small talk lasts between two people who have not come for small talk, which was not very long at all. Then Mrs. Han opened her bag with the unhurried efficiency of a woman who had done this before, produced her checkbook, wrote something with the confidence of someone who had never once been told that a number was not enough, tore it out, and slid it across the table. Stephanie watched it travel, did not stop it, did not touch it, let it sit there on the white tablecloth between them. Mrs. Han folded her hands and waited. She had done this 3 times before. A restaurant manager's wife in Busan, a doctor's daughter from a good family in Daegu, a woman from Jeju whose family had connections that had seemed relevant for approximately 6 weeks. It had always worked at the check, sometimes before the check. It had never failed to work at the check. Stephanie picked up her tea, took a sip, set it down, then she reached out, picked up the check, unfolded it carefully, read the number from left to right with the focused attention of a woman reading a contract clause, folded it again along the same crease, and put it in her bag. She stood up, buttoned her jacket, picked up her bag, and smiled at Han Boxen with the warm, genuine expression of someone who had genuinely enjoyed a pleasant afternoon. Thank you for lunch, She walked out of the restaurant while Mrs. Han sat at the table with her checkbook still open and the particular expression of a woman whose plan had executed exactly as designed and whose instincts were filing a report that said something was wrong and she could not yet identify what. She called Taewon before she had left the restaurant parking lot. He picked up on the second ring. "I had lunch with your girlfriend today." Her voice had the specific temperature of a matter that had been resolved. "The situation has been handled. She understood the terms. I suggest you give her some time and space, and then we can begin discussing the Minjung timeline more seriously, because the window is not going to stay open indefinitely, and—" She took the check. She took the check, yes, which tells you everything you need to know about the kind of woman she is. A woman who genuinely loves you does not look at a number and walk away. Taewon. This is her character showing itself, and I need you to look at it clearly and understand what it means because I understand. Good, because the Han name requires, I said I understand Iyama. He hung up. He called Stephanie. She picked up on the first ring. My mother says the situation has been handled. Your mother is an incredibly generous woman. His chest tightened. Stephanie. His voice dropped. Please tell me you didn't take it. Please tell me you didn't take her money. Silence on the other end. We just opened the curtains. We just decided something. You told me you loved me and you wanted to do life with me, and I believed you. I believed every word, so please, tell me you didn't take it. Taewon. Because if you took it, then everything you said in that study was— He stopped. His jaw tightened. Just tell me, did you take her check or not? I took it. The office went very quiet. He sat down slowly in his chair like a man whose legs had made a private decision. Okay, he said, just okay. The voice of a man who had just watched a door close that he had only just managed to open. Stephanie. Your mother is an incredibly generous woman. He stood up from his chair, sat back down. Stephanie. I love her. I genuinely love her. I cannot wait for her to be my mother-in-law. He stood back up. What? She offered. It would have been extraordinarily rude to refuse a gift. That money was meant to make you disappear. I know it didn't work. These things happen. Stephanie. He was on his feet now, standing in the middle of his office, pointing at nothing. That woman has been trying to dismantle us since the gala. She sat across a table from you and slid money toward you and you. You put it in your bag? And I said thank you. Yes. I cannot. He stopped, pressed his hand to his forehead. What is happening right now? Come to my office tomorrow morning, early, before the convoy. We have work to do. The check is a welcome gift from my future mother-in-law, and I am keeping every single one. Good night, Taewon. She hung up. He stood in his office holding his phone. Then he sat down slowly in his chair, sat there. Then he picked it up and called Collins. My mother tried to buy Stephanie off. A pause. What happened? She took the check. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then Collins started laughing. He laughed the way a man laughs when something exceeds every expectation he had prepared himself for. He laughed for a long time. Taewon waited. Collins eventually got enough of himself back together to say, Taewon, marry that woman immediately. Do not wait. Taewon said, good night, Collins. Collins said, still laughing, call me when you have a date. He hung up. He sat in his office for a long time after that. Then something started in his chest that moved upward and came out of his face, and Han Taewon sat alone in his office at 10:30 at night, laughing quietly to himself, and then stopping, and then starting again, and finally sitting back in his chair and looking at the ceiling with the expression of a man who has just understood something important about the next 50 years of his life. He was at her office before his convoy the next morning. She spread the documents across the conference table, walked him through everything she had found. The alterations in the document his mother had been presenting to the board, the original in the safe, the registration trail she had followed to confirm exactly which safe and exactly where. Everything landed exactly where they had expected it to land. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. He looked at her across the table. You are sitting here planning to take my mother's empire apart while her check is still in your bag. It was a welcome gift. Stephanie. She tips well, Taewon. A woman who tips like that is going to make an excellent, generous grandmother to our children. She said it with complete seriousness and picked up her pen. He stared at her. Then he laughed. The kind of laugh that starts somewhere real and comes out before you can manage it. He shook his head slowly. Our children's grandmother. he said. Very generous woman. He shook his head again, still laughing. Your father. I need the code before the end of the week. I'll go this afternoon. Vincent moves in 3 days. By the fourth morning it's done. She looked up from her notes. Call a board meeting for Wednesday. Already on my mind. Together. He held her eyes. Together. He drove to his parents' house that afternoon. His mother was at a luncheon. His father was in the garden, standing near the back wall looking at the tree that had been there since before Taewon was born. Taewon stood beside him. They were quiet together for a moment. Then he told his father everything. His father listened without interrupting, without moving. When Taewon finished, his father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the code is 2408, your birthday. She has always been sentimental about the things she considers hers. He straightened his jacket. Which hotel? Taewon looked at him. Appa. Which hotel, Taewon? I have been waiting for this conversation for 30 years. I am not going to pretend I need time to decide. He looked at his son. Which hotel? The one in Itaewon. I already booked it. Corner suite. His father nodded slowly, the nod of a man who has just received information that meets his standards. Good, he said. He looked at the tree for one more moment, then he turned and looked at his son directly. Don't lose her. He said it simply, like a man who has learned the cost of losing things and is determined that his son will not pay the same price. Whatever it costs, don't lose her. He turned and walked back toward the house, and Taewon stood in the garden watching him go and felt the particular weight of a man carrying years of something he had finally been able to put down. That was Tuesday. Wednesday morning Minjung arrived. Taewon was at his desk reviewing the reports from the night team when his reception called up. There is a visitor, sir. She doesn't have an appointment. She says you will know who she is. What does she look like? A pause on the line, the particular pause of a receptionist choosing words carefully. She is pregnant, sir. About 4 months. She came with 2 people. She is standing at reception like she is expecting someone to roll something out. He closed his eyes, opened them. Send her up. Minjung came off the elevator the way a woman comes off an elevator when she has rehearsed every step of the walk. Shoulders back, the cream dress structured around the 4-month pregnancy with the deliberate precision of a woman who understood exactly what she was announcing and to whom. The puff sleeves so architectural and so enormous that they had their own atmosphere. She had left her 2 people at the elevator, and she walked to his office door and opened it and walked in and sat down across from his desk and crossed one leg over the other and looked at him with the composed certainty of a woman who believes the situation has already been decided and she is simply here to confirm the timeline. We need to set a date, she said. I have been patient. I have been very patient. I am not going to give birth out of wedlock, and your mother and my family have agreed on the general outline, and what we need now from you is a ring and a date, and we need both of them before the end of this month. Taewon looked at her. He opened his mouth. The door opened. Stephanie walked in. She saw Taewon across the office, walked directly to him, took his face in both hands and kissed him the way people kiss when they are completely present, and the room around them is entirely irrelevant. Not long, not a performance, just real and total and absolutely unbothered by the concept of an audience. She pulled back, reached into her bag without looking away from him, produced a file and put it on his desk. Kim contract amendment. Sign the last page. I need it back before 3. She picked up her bag, turned toward the door, stopped, turned back. Looked at Taewon with the slight focused frown of a woman who has just noticed a professional concern that needs to be addressed. Did you hire a pregnant cleaner? She gestured in the general direction of where Minjung was sitting without looking at her directly. I ask because there are very specific occupational health and safety regulations around employing pregnant women in office environments, and the liability exposure in the 2nd trimester specifically is significant. And the last thing you need right now, on top of everything else, is an HR situation that could have been avoided with basic... Excuse me? Minjung said. Stephanie did not look at her. She was looking at Taewon with the attentive focus of a legal professional, identifying a compliance gap and waiting for confirmation that it had been registered. I can send you the relevant sections of the labor code if you want to review them before end of day. It would take me about 10 minutes. She picked up her bag fully. I'll pick you up at 7. Eat something before then. She walked out. The door closed. The office was very quiet. Minjung sat in her chair with her puff sleeves and looked at the closed door. Then she looked at Taewon. He had the expression of a man who was exercising a very significant amount of self-control over his own face and was largely succeeding. Was that, my girlfriend? Yes. She just called me a cleaner. She raised an occupational health concern. Minjung stood up. Her puff sleeves rose with her in a way that was genuinely impressive architecturally. Your mother will hear about this. She usually does. He picked up the file Stephanie had left, turned to the last page, signed it. Minjung looked at him signing the file, looked at the door, looked at him again with the expression of a woman who had come in here with a plan and was leaving with a completely different situation to process. She picked up her bag, walked to the door with the dignity of someone who needed several hours in a quiet room before any of this was going to make sense. She stopped at the door, turned back one more time. You are making a mistake. He looked up from the file. I make my own now. Have a safe drive. She left. He texted Stephanie immediately. She thinks you called her a cleaner. 3 dots. Then, I raised an occupational health and safety concern, completely different legal category. Then, did you sign the Kim contract? He sent, yes. She sent, good, 7 o'clock, don't be late. He put his phone down, picked it up, put it down, then he called Mr. O in. Double Miss Terry's security detail starting today, quiet. She doesn't need to know about it. She will notice. Eventually, by then it won't be negotiable. Understood. He left. Taewon went back to his reports. 3 days after the garden, his father packed a small bag. He put it in his car himself, left his phone on the kitchen counter the way Taewon had told him to, drove to Itaewon, checked in under the name Taewon's people had arranged, went up to the corner suite, stood at the window for a moment looking at the city, the whole city, spread out below him the way it had apparently been spread out the whole time, he just hadn't been in a position to look, and then turned away from the window and called room service and ordered 3 things and sat down and turned on the television and watched what he wanted to watch. It was an extraordinary Friday evening. By 6, his mother had called his phone 4 times. By 7, she had called Taewon. He picked up on the second ring. Your father isn't home. He's probably with friends Iyama. He seemed fine this morning. He doesn't have friends he goes to without telling me. He has never in all our years of marriage gone anywhere without telling me first. People sometimes need some air. He'll be back. Find him Taewon, now. I'll look into it. Don't worry. He hung up, sent his father a message. She's started. How's the hotel? The reply came in 40 seconds, a thumbs up, then 30 seconds later. The corner suite has a view of the entire city. I have ordered 3 things from room service. I am watching something your mother would never have allowed. Han Young-soo has entered the building. Taewon showed Stephanie the message. She read it, looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned away and looked at the wall, and her shoulders did something that she was very carefully not letting become anything. Then she stepped away from him and dialed. He watched her from across the room. When Vincent picked up, her voice dropped to the particular register she used when something was not a request. Tonight, the secondary office on Gangnam-daro. The code is 2408. I need the original founding document of the Han Group Holdings. Everything else stays exactly where it is. You have until 3 a.m. A pause while Vincent said something. Her expression didn't change. I know exactly what I am asking. This is the first favor, Vincent. Another pause. Do not make me say please. She hung up, turned to Taewon. By morning. By midnight, Vincent had the safe open. By 2 in the morning, the document was out. By 2:30, Stephanie had photographs of every single page on her phone and was already typing. By 6, she was at her firm. By 9, the filing was registered and done and real and could not be undone by anyone including Han Boksun. His mother called at 9:14. He picked up on the second ring. Still nothing. Your father is still not home. Iyama, he is a grown man. He is fine. Taewon, come for Sunday lunch. Everything will be clear by then. I promise. Things are not fine. I need you to take this seriously. I am taking everything very seriously. He hung up before she could find the next word. He texted Stephanie. Done. Her reply came back in 20 seconds. I know, filed 9 minutes ago. Go run your empire. He smiled, put his phone face down on his desk, looked at Seoul through his office window. Then he picked up his pen and went back to work. His father came home Sunday evening. He walked through the front door with his small bag and the expression of a man who had slept magnificently for 2 nights, eaten whatever he wanted 4 times a day, watched 3 complete films and a documentary series without a single opinion being offered about his choices, and was not going to apologize for any of it. His mother was in the sitting room. She stood up the moment she heard the door, came to the entrance hall, looked at him. He looked back at her, set his bag down. "I needed some air." "You have been gone for 2 days without a single, some air boxin." He walked past her toward the kitchen. "I'm going to make some tea. Would you like some?" She stood in the entrance hall and watched him disappear into the kitchen. Then she stood there for a long moment looking at the space he had left behind, with the expression of a woman who has just discovered that a door she was absolutely certain she had locked has been standing open for some time, and she cannot determine when this happened or how, and that not knowing is the most unsettling part of all. In the kitchen, her husband was making tea, humming. She watched him from the doorway. He did not look up, did not explain himself further, did not ask for her reaction to any of it, simply moved around his own kitchen making his own tea, humming something she didn't recognize, and looking like a man who was completely comfortable with where he was and what he was doing, and had recently remembered what that felt like. She went to bed that night with the particular unease of a woman whose map no longer matches the territory it is supposed to be describing. Wednesday arrived, and so did the board meeting. Taewon's convoy arrived at 8. He walked in, took his seat at the head of the table. His table, in his boardroom, running his empire with his name on the document that was now filed in the correct place, with the correct authority behind it, and could not be touched by anyone. Stephanie sat 2 seats to his right with her file open, and her pen ready, and her face carrying the specific expression of a woman who already knows how this meeting ends and is simply here to make sure it ends correctly. His mother sat at the far end of the table. His father sat 3 seats from her and looked at the surface in front of him with the serene composure of a man who has recently had an excellent weekend and made several private decisions and is at complete peace with all of them. 20 minutes of routine business, then governance. Taewon's lawyer placed the original founding document on the table and walked the room through it. The registration, the legal standing, what it meant for the structure of the Han Group going forward, what it meant for everything that had been operating under the assumption of a different document. The room was very quiet. His mother looked at the document on the table, looked at her son at the head of it, looked at Stephanie, who was making a note on her legal pad without looking up. Then she looked at her husband sitting 3 seats away. "Young-soo, tell them this is not right." His father looked at the document on the table, then he looked at his wife. "It looks right to me," he said quietly, and went back to looking at the table. The room was very quiet. Mrs. Han stared at her husband, then she turned back to her son. "This document is not legitimate." Taewon's lawyer explained patiently and thoroughly that it was in fact the most legitimate item currently in the room. "I want my own counsel present before this continues." "Of course," Taewon said. "We can schedule a follow-up session with full counsel on all sides. The filing has already been processed and registered. Today's meeting continues." Mrs. Han looked at her son. "This meeting should be paused." The chairman of the board, a man who had been in that seat for 11 years and had seen many things in that boardroom, looked at the document in front of him. Then at the filing confirmation Taewon's lawyer had placed beside it. Then at Mrs. Han. "Madam Han, the document has been verified and filed. The registration is confirmed. This board has an obligation to proceed." He looked around the table. "All in favor of recognizing the original document as the governing instrument of the Han Group?" Hands went up, one by one, around the table, not all of them immediately, but enough, then all of them. Mrs. Han watched every hand go up, including the hand of a man 3 seats away from her who had not raised his hand at a board meeting in 30 years. Her husband's hand was in the air. She stared at it. He looked straight ahead. "The motion carries," the chairman said. Taewon looked at his mother from the head of his table. "Your role going forward is advisory, non-executive. The transition team will walk you through everything. They are excellent, very thorough. They handle these situations with a great deal of care and professionalism." A pause, just long enough. "Or there is a facility in Jeju that I have already researched personally. Beautiful location, really exceptional staff, very attentive. I can have everything fully arranged by Friday if you would prefer not to be involved in the transition process at all. Every person at the table stopped breathing simultaneously. Mrs. Han looked at Taewon, the son she had dressed and directed and managed and arranged and protected and controlled from the day he came into the world all the way to this boardroom. She looked at Stephanie, who had looked up from her legal pad and was watching her with the patient expression of someone who has read the last page of a book and is waiting politely for everyone else to get there. She looked at her husband 3 seats away, who was looking at the table in front of him with the complete and total composure of a man who has made his choices and is at peace with every single one of them, and is not going to make eye contact with anyone at this table under any circumstances. She looked back at her son. "Advisory," she said. "Advisory," he confirmed. The meeting continued. Afterward, in the corridor, Taewon was surrounded by board members with questions, and Stephanie stood near the window with her file and waited. His mother appeared beside her. They stood there looking out at Seoul through the glass. Neither of them said anything for long enough that the silence became something they were both choosing. "You took my check. You offered it. I thought you were like the others." Stephanie said nothing. "I underestimated you." Directly, without softening it, a fact she had evaluated and accepted without negotiation. "I don't do that often." "I know." A pause. Outside, Seoul moved. "You will not let him be careless with what he has built." "No." Mrs. Han looked at the city through the glass, her back straight, hands folded, looking exactly as she always looked, and underneath it, just beneath the surface, in the place where all the control lived, something that had been a mother long before it learned to be a strategist. "He has always been a good man, from the beginning. I told myself everything I did was to protect that." She stopped. "I confused protecting him with owning him for so long I stopped being able to tell the difference." Stephanie looked at her. "Don't let him forget who he is when things become easy. Easy is when people forget." "I won't." She nodded. Once, the nod of a woman filing something permanently. Then she reached into her bag and took out her checkbook, wrote something, tore it out and placed it on the windowsill between them. "Wedding gift." She walked away down the corridor with her back straight and her hands folded and her chin level, and did not look back once. Stephanie stood at the window looking at the check on the windowsill, picked it up, looked at the number, looked down the corridor where the woman had gone. Then she took out her phone and called Taewon. He picked up mid-sentence with someone. "Your mother just gave me a wedding gift." A pause. She heard him excuse himself from whoever he was with. Then, "We're not married." "I know, she seems confident." A longer pause. "Are you okay?" She looked at the check on the windowsill, at the corridor where the woman had gone, at Seoul through the glass. "I think I like her." He was quiet for a moment. "Do not tell her that. She will take it as an opening." Stephanie laughed. "I am completely serious." She laughed again. "I'll see you at home." She hung up, still laughing, and he stood in the corridor of his boardroom with something on his face that 2 separate board members saw on their way past and would discuss between themselves in lowered voices for the next 3 weeks. 6 months after the board meeting, on a Saturday in April, they got married. Small, considered, exactly right in every detail. Collins gave a speech that lasted 20 minutes and involved laminated printed screenshots of text messages that he had been quietly, methodically collecting and archiving for months, with the focused dedication of a man who understood that this moment was worth preparing for properly. He began with the first call, 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, 6 weeks after Stephanie joined the legal team, subject professional update, and worked forward through 18 more in chronological order with timestamps. He had notes. He had highlighted sections. He had arranged them thematically within the chronological structure. The room laughed. Taewon sat at the head table, and his jaw was doing something that was technically the expression of a man who was fine and was not convincing anyone in the room. And at one point, Stephanie leaned over and said very quietly into his ear, 18 calls? And he said at a volume specifically calibrated for Collins to hear across the room, "Collins should be aware that I am a patient man with an excellent memory, and neither of those things has an expiration date." And Collins raised his laminated screenshot and said, "Every single one was worth it." And the room laughed again, and his mother at the family table picked up her glass and drank and said nothing, and the nothing said everything. His father danced with Stephanie at the reception. 2 songs. He held her hand the way fathers hold daughters when they mean it, and near the end of the second song, he said quietly close to her ear, "You have my gratitude." "For what?" For years of things I couldn't say to anyone. I believe that problem has been permanently resolved. He was smiling the smile of a man who had checked into a corner suite with a city view and eaten room service and watched what he wanted and come home to find that the temperature of his own house had changed and was not going to change back, and who was not even slightly sorry about any of it. "Call me Appa." She looked at him for a moment. "Okay, Appa." He beamed like a man who has won something he had stopped expecting to ever win, and the winning of it is better than he remembered hoping it would be. His mother watched the dance from the family table. She picked up her glass, drank, set it down, said nothing. For Han Boksin, saying nothing at a moment that required something was the loudest and most complete endorsement she knew how to give. Their first son arrived 11 months after the wedding. Their second arrived 20 months after that. The Han house became the kind of house that had small shoes multiplying by the front door in a pattern that defied containment and fingerprints on surfaces that had been designed without fingerprints in mind, and a level of ambient noise that the housekeeper had developed a philosophy about, because a philosophy was the only thing that was going to get her through it. Taewon ran his empire from 7 to 6, came home, sat on the floor because his sons required floor sitting, and he had decided early that this was non-negotiable, regardless of what it did to his suits, and he had simply started buying suits that could be sat on the floor in. He ate dinner with his family. He slept. He did it again the next day. Sunday evenings the whole family came. Collins and his wife, his parents, the boys treating the house like a renovation project with an aggressive timeline. His mother had developed a habit of arriving 30 minutes before anyone else and rearranging one specific thing in the kitchen, a different thing each Sunday, always small, always precise. Stephanie had developed a habit of noticing exactly what had been moved, saying nothing about it, and putting it back exactly where it had been after his mother sat down. They had never discussed this. It simply existed between them, the way certain things exist between two people who understand each other well enough not to need to name what they understand. His father watched it happen every Sunday from his chair near the window and had the expression of a man watching his absolute favorite thing. On one particular Sunday, Stephanie was telling a story about something that had happened at her firm that week. She was making it funnier than it had actually been, which was something she did when she was performing for people she loved, finding the angle, sharpening the timing, giving the room what it needed. Her hands were moving the way they moved when she was fully in it. Both boys had stopped what they were doing to watch her, because they had learned very early that when their mother's hands moved like that, and her voice did that thing, something good was coming and they did not want to miss it. Collins was leaning forward with his elbows on the table. His father had the expression of a man fighting very hard not to be the first one to laugh and losing that fight badly. Even his mother at the other end of the table was doing the thing where her face stayed composed and her eyes gave everything away, and she was clearly losing the fight too, and knew it, and was not going to acknowledge it. Taewon sat at the head of his table and watched her. He watched her hands moving over the story. He watched the room organize itself around her the way rooms had always organized themselves around him, without being asked, without announcement, simply because of what she was. He watched his sons watching her with their whole faces completely open. He watched his father loose and easy in his chair, in a way he had not been in years before a Friday when he drove himself to a hotel with a city view and came home 2 days later, having remembered something important about who he was when nobody was managing him. He watched his mother at the other end of the table in a role she had not chosen, sitting in a house she had not controlled for 4 years, now finding slowly, and without announcing it, that there were things in this room she could not arrange or manage or move, and that this, perhaps, was not the catastrophe she had spent the best part of her life trying to prevent. He watched all of it, then he said her name across the table. "Stephanie." She stopped mid-sentence. The room looked at him. She looked at him. "I love you." Across the table, in front of all of them. No occasion arranged for it, no setup, no ceremony around it. Just the fact of it, sitting there in the air between them, the way it had been sitting there every single day since a Thursday morning in October, when someone knocked once and opened his office door before he could answer, and everything he had so carefully organized and promised and protected began quietly and completely to become something else. As the mother of my sons, as the person across this table from me, every day since a Thursday, I love you. The room was quiet. Stephanie looked at him across the Sunday dinner table. The man who had crossed a room at a gala because he could not wait for an invitation. who had stood in front of his desk instead of behind it and said the truest thing he knew, like a man saying something real for the first time after years of only saying things that were useful, who had pulled open curtains after 3 days in the dark and planned and moved and fought and chosen her every single day in every way that actually mattered long before he ever said it out loud at a table with their sons and his mother and soul outside the window and the rest of their life already fully underway around them. "I know," she said. Collins put his fork down. "That is it. 20 minutes I gave at the wedding, laminated screenshots, timestamps, and all he gets back is 'I know'?" His father looked up from his. "She knows." From the end of the table, without looking up from her plate, without missing a beat, Mrs. Hahn said, "She knows," and picked up her glass. The boys went back to whatever they had been doing to the house. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, looked at the situation, made a private decision, disappeared. Outside, Seoul moved the way it always moved, fast, bright, completely without apology. Inside the Han house on a Sunday evening, Han Taiwan sat at the head of his table and said nothing else. He had crossed a room once because he couldn't wait. He would cross it again every single day for the rest of his life. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know exactly what to do. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a Stephanie Terry in their life, someone who walks into a kitchen, picks up a knife, and sends a whole woman to the hospital without breaking a sweat. Someone who takes a check meant to end her and calls it a welcome gift. Someone who circles a man in his own study and makes him open his curtains and his heart at the same time. Subscribe if you haven't already, turn on your notifications, and tell me in the comments, which moment was your favorite? Drop it below. We will see you in the next one.